welcome everyone to the first Veeam cybersecurity space meetup. I think the first one ever. Very warm welcome. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on your time zone. Um, we have an agenda prepared for today, and we will have, as far as I can spoiler right now, an open discussion afterwards. Very warm welcome. I'd like to go through the agenda real quick. We have, first of all, a short introduction of the leaders. Currently, we are 2 out of 3 leaders today that are available and presenting stuff to you. We have an overview about the cybersecurity space. So for those of you who might not be familiar with the community and the hub at all, we will just go through some topics. Then we have presentation part. We would like to give an overview about the current state of cybersecurity. So some facts, some data. We have an update on budgets. And from the practical experience, we'd like to give an overview on where to begin. Especially in Europe, I think small organizations are in the focus of cybercrime, so takeover in small organizations is definitely a topic. We'd like to talk about ransomware threats. I think it's all over the place right now. I will talk about multi-factor authentication and passkeys and giving up passwords at all. We have a change of attack vectors. And last but not least, we have incident response plans, and we would like to give an overview about that. We'd like to end the session with a Q&A and a voting. Since this is the first meetup ever, I would like to get some feedback on the agenda and collect some wishes on upcoming events. We already have something pre-planned and like to take this to the discussion. And by the time of the Q&A, we will grant the right to unmute as far as you don't have the right, and we will just join the discussion like we would be in person. So let's begin with a very short introduction of the leaders. The timekeeping will be, I think we take around 60 minutes, up to 60 minutes for the presentation. So grab your coffee, grab some cold drinks, sit back and relax. I'd like to begin. So my name is Lucas. As far as you know, I'm from Germany. You might heard of me before because I'm trying to be very active in the community hub forum. I'm working as a senior consultant, specialized in backup and recovery, obviously with Veeam. And since 2025, I'm very happy to call myself Veeam Vanguard. So Dibs, happy to hand over to you.
Hello. So, hi, yeah. So, well, I go by the name Dips on the community forums, but my name's Dippin, and I am in the United Kingdom, not in London, a little bit away from London, and I work as an IT security specialist for a financial firm. And I have been a Veeam legend for, I think, since 24, I'm trying to think, 2022, so just come up to 3 years now. So, yeah, that's me.
Perfect. Thank you. So when we talk about cybersecurity space, or in short CSS, we're talking about the Veeam Community Hub Forum. So one of the user groups, I think you might recognize the logo. What is that? So what we do, or what we'd like to move forward to. We'd like to post event and presentation notifications. For those of you who joined the last meeting, I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks ago, I presented the new or some kind of Veeam hardening basics. That was a request from the community, so that's what we'd like to do. We'd like to keep and collect the wishes and the requests from you, from the community, from the field, take them and maybe schedule some events or presentations or just provide some contents. For those of you who are familiar with the forum, you might know that, or might have recognized that we have information about vulnerabilities, so CVEs for Veeam and also for other products, vSphere, Broadcom products, and all the others. Postgres, since this is the main database of Veeam backup replication, and all that stuff regarding the cybersecurity space. We have learning paths available and we have certifications available. So there are many like open source and free to join learning paths, certifications. I think one of the posts is pinned to the forum as headline. So just feel free to to join them, to update them, and to just study and take free trainings. We have reports. You will see reports in a few minutes from DIPS, and we post reports and some fact sheets to current cybersecurity topics, to IT security topics. That includes ransomware, that includes any kind of vulnerabilities. So just some basic information from the field and from the whole world, basically. We have, because this is a technical community, I think that's the base. We have best practices, we have technical solutions, and going deeper into that, we have scripts and guides for different topics. We have experiences, we have questions, of course, and some interesting discussions going on. I think one of the most popular topics has around 10,000 or 20,000 views. I think that's basically a very huge number. So we currently are, maybe someone will correct me, I think it's 508 people in the community, something like that, or 580, something like that. So just a little bit below 600. Checked that last week. So very large community, for my opinion. And obviously we have questions, discussions that regard hardening, security, and especially Veeam with the security focus, since the basic product support can't be handled basically by the forum. So, Dibs, what
Yep.
about the current state of cybersecurity?
Right, so now that we've gone through the introduction, so I think for this first session, we're probably going to go with more to do with more, it's not we're probably going to go through more content rather than any demos for now, but because since being first um, meetup, I think we'll do this as the first one, and then we'll probably decide. Sorry, losing my voice, and we'll probably decide on the following meetups whether we include some demos and probably some additional content. But obviously, would be happy to get some feedback as well, yeah, and then go from there. And we'd like to know, like Lucas said earlier, about topics and stuff you'd be interested in, and obviously we would also want to try and um, get the community a bit more active as well than it has been recently. So yeah, anyway, so let's begin with the topics today. So we show so the current state of cybersecurity. I think we were on. So I think we will begin with so Lucas, if you wanted to just yep, go for it.
Just trying to keep up the
Um,
pace, so let's see how it works.
No, it's fine. So yeah, so current state of cybersecurity, I think so. I mean, cybersecurity as a whole is a massive topic, and like, I mean, everywhere you go, well, everywhere, every in the news and everywhere, you probably hear about cybersecurity quite a lot. And I mean, it is a vast topic. It's not just personal cybersecurity. You got business cybersecurity. It's just vast. But I think for us, we'll probably concentrate on more on the business side of things. So what we will do to begin with is, yeah, we'll go with organizational. So I'll start off by saying that with cybersecurity, the one thing to remember is that it's not a one size fits all type thing. It depends on the organization that cybersecurity applies to. Like an example could be a library, for example. That's a public organization. Their cybersecurity needs are going to be a lot different than from a financial organization, because financial organizations more interested in protecting the client's data, monetary investments as well. A library, for example, would probably be more interested in protecting their users. They probably have a lot of people using the services, so their scopes are completely different, and cybersecurity has to be tailored for that organization. And additionally, a public entity as a library would probably have a very limited budget in what they can spend on cybersecurity, and their probably monetary um, budgets are probably set by a central entity, which is probably a local council. And with a lot of councils, especially here in the UK, going through financial difficulties, they do tend to cut or not make a massive budget available for cybersecurity, and they have small teams, or probably probably in majority of cases, it's they outsource cybersecurity to a managed service provider, and they will then provide the cybersecurity policies or processes for that library, but they would probably they're one organization detached, so they won't know the inner workings of a library as much as if there was somebody actually embedded in the library. For a large financial organization, they will have a budget and they may spend a lot of money on their cybersecurity posture because they will have a large budget, and they will be having to meet regulatory requirements. I mean, with things like DORA, which is the latest EU legislation, and then obviously there's a GDPR as well, which even though the UK is out of the EU, GDPR still applies. So there is a massive emphasis on protecting user data, and with the DORA as well now mandating that um, I think one of the main points with DORA was a yearly or annual penetration test, and those are not cheap. They are quite expensive, and I mean, if, for a financial organization, with them meeting or them having the budgetary requirements, they will be able to do these annual penetration tests, while library will probably not do that, and they'll rely on their um, managed service provider or managed security provider to provide those services. So it varies according to organization, and again, these are quite different examples. So one's public, one private, and their aims are different as well. So that's pretty much where cybersecurity stands. It's different, but again, it's important for all types of organizations, because with the current threat of cybersecurity as well, from previously when cybersecurity used to be a point where um, I think when I first started in cybersecurity, or when my background is more infrastructure side, so when I started in that, there's more things like what we used to call them script kiddies, where young kids would probably download scripts from the internet and then run them against websites or stuff. But now it's becoming more hostile, more threatening. Ransomware, for example, is probably one of the big ones. The data exfiltration is another problem. And it seems to keep evolving as well, because there are now organized criminal gangs running these I don't know what cybercrime gangs, I'd probably say, because with takedowns that happen, you usually find out that it's not just one person. There's a whole infrastructure behind it. Um, there's multiple people involved in it, and some of them are run as businesses as well. So there have been instances where an organization will get ransomware, and when they get in touch, they'll have like a service desk ticket to open, and um, then the user interacts with them like through one of those chat mediums, and then try and negotiate a ransomware price. So it's like a whole ecosystem that now runs behind cybercrime, and hence with that taking over, it's very important, or doubly important, for organizations to try and be as secure as possible. Um, so as on the presentation, so like ransomware, as I mentioned, is probably one of the biggest threats. But again, data exfiltration, and now we have backdoors as well. So even if an organization is ransomware, or they have what they call them APTs. So these are persistent threats that sit within an organization's network, and they try and exfiltrate data so that in a way that it's very hard to notice if the relevant monitoring is not in place. And even if they are found and removed, they will leave backdoors in place, and they will try and get back in. And when that happens, if they find that they are not having much success, sabotage operations, where they will basically they want to destroy the network of that organization. And once they do that, it becomes really, really difficult to recover. And also with how long or until they call in someone external, that's what usually happens in these cases. It can be very difficult to find out when they first entered, through which vulnerability, and how can you tell if the network's been as secure as what it was before they managed to infiltrate the organization. And leading with this is that it is very, very difficult to prosecute because with cyber crime and cyber criminals, it is very, very difficult to collate the actual information required to prosecute them. It's with cybercrime, it's a cross-border. It's a cross-border problem because someone in some country thousands of miles away would be launching these operations. They could be using infrastructure such as VPNs, backdoored organizations, or they call botnets, which is lots of computers that have been taken over by malware. And even if the authorities find out who that is, it is very hard to get a conviction because the government of the country, they might not have an extradition treaty with the prosecuting country, and additionally trying to gather enough evidence to try and get them exfiltrated can take a very, very long time. And by that time, they could have disappeared, cover their tracks, or no longer be doing what they have been doing and probably pivot to doing something else. I mean, Lockbit is an example where they were taken down, but on the grapevine, as they call it, there is news that they seem to be coming back again. So even though I think it was the NCSC, the FBI, they took them down, but it looks like they are making a comeback again. So it's a multifaceted organization. I mean, cybercrime is, and it's just really, really difficult to prosecute. And for a lot of them, it feels like they are untouchable, and hence they keep carrying on doing this. And I mean, there are instances where they have been caught and extradited to I mean, United States is one example, but take one down, there'll always be someone else who'll take over because of the tooling that is available now. I mean, AI is another threat vector that seems to be gaining popularity now, and it's just it's a constant. It's a I'm trying to find the right word for it. It's like a constantly changing um, constantly changing thing. There isn't one, you can't put a finger on it. It changes, and the bad guys always think outside the box. They will try and uh, penetrate an organization in any way that they can think of, and supply chain compromises is one of those. So instead of now with organizations taking more and more interest in their cybersecurity and making it more harder and harder for them to just access an organization, they are now going towards supply chain, which is basically trying to inject malicious code into external open source libraries. And then when those libraries are used within an organization, they can then use those they can then use those binaries to then infiltrate the organization or exfiltrate data. So it is and continues to be a multifaceted operation. So yeah, fortunately, it's not a simple way of securing it, but probably one of the biggest and main things is multi-factor authentication. So multi-factor authentication probably will reduce 99.9% of attacks on an organization, because phishing emails is probably one of the most popular ways of getting into an organization, because it just means our user will click on an email and they'll enter their username and password, and the bad guy will get their details, and then they can just use those. And with automation now, it doesn't take long for someone to grab those details and log into a user's account and start pivoting. So they'll email additional people from within that user's mailbox. So it looks like they come from that organization. It looks legitimate, and then another user gets compromised. But with MFA, they have to go through another authentication, which means that there is another action that needs to be taken by the user to gain access. And if the attacker can't get through MFA, then that basically kills the attack. And and at least if there's monitoring in place, the users or their organization can be made aware that an attack has taken place. But again, it is not foolproof. There are MFA attacks in place. And now there's another way they're getting into it now. So now with MFA becoming more and more prevalent, info stealers are beginning to gain popularity as well. Now, what an info stealer is they will try and there are various ways, but an info stealer is basically some software gets downloaded and it basically steals a session cookie of your login. So if you're logged into your email, your email, the email application will store a cookie. If the bad guy can get a hold of that cookie, they can and exfiltrate it. They can then use that same cookie to get access to your account. And because it's a session that's already open, the user's not going to know about it and they've already got access to your mailbox, for example. But then again, they can start pivoting and no one's going to be any wiser. So info stealers are beginning to gain popularity, but they do need user action because they do send phishing emails with Word documents and then they say, copy this PowerShell code and paste it in the run box. If the user doesn't do that, then they may be safe. But again, it varies quite considerably depending on the type of attack. And a lot of attacks as well means that the malicious actors now do their research. They will target organizations and target particular people, especially if they've got their profiles on their website. They'll know who the, say, finance person is, and they will then send direct emails to them. And it has less chance of getting caught in a quarantine filter because the quarantine filter doesn't see hundreds of emails going to the whole organization. It'll see there'll just be one email that looks legitimate, and it could be something like invoice that needs paying, and they just need to click. And with 0 days in software, it's not very difficult to gain access to to a machine. So InfoSteal is definitely gaining popularity. I mean, we have a good report is the Microsoft Digital Defense Report, which they publish. But I think I might be running over, so I might not. We might not go through the links at the moment, but
Yeah,
it's
just as
definitely
a
worth checking. Sorry.
yeah, just as a disclaimer, we will post the presentation and all the links afterwards in the community app. So don't worry, you don't miss anything today.
Yep. So digital defense reports are definitely worth a read. It is definitely a good, especially the executive summary. It gives a good overview of what is going on. And I'm just going to get the quote. Microsoft currently says that the current state is complex, challenging, and increasingly dangerous. It says adversaries are becoming better resourced and better prepared with sophisticated tools and tactics. So yeah, that's where we are at with it at the moment. So budget-wise, so as mentioned earlier, um, it depends. I mean, if you've got an unlimited budget, you can get all the latest tools. You can try and maximize. You can buy all the snazzy AI detection tools, endpoint detection, and then. But if you're at the local library down the road, I don't think you're not going to have that budget to buy all the latest AI tools and stuff. And the nature of public libraries is open to the public, so anyone can walk in, get access to a computer, and do what they like. So it'll depend on the local, either their local IT team or their managed security provider to provide the security on the library network. And then you have the financial organization who probably has a bigger budget and they can purchase all these. There's a lot of AI threat detecting tools now. You've got what they call endpoint detection response, EDR, and then they have evolved as well, call them extended XDR, which is extended detection response. So it's able to mitigate and detect a lot more attacks, but budgets at the moment are probably quite constrained for a lot of the local authorities, especially here in the UK. Um, and yep, and there's always a there's always a misconception that if you're a small business, you're less likely to be on an attacker's radar. The meaning behind that there is if you're a small business, you probably think, oh, I'm too small. No one's going to try and come after us, or even if they do, we haven't got much to lose because we're smaller. They're probably going to go after the big guys, and they're probably going to get better coverage or better Usually it's monetary value, better monetary value from the bigger organization, but for a small organization, if they're a small supplier, and you have, I mean, usually in smaller businesses, and I've worked previously in smaller ones where one person does a multitude of roles, it's very easy for them to click on links and get compromised. And even if one person is compromised, the impact on them is probably going to be a lot more greater than on a bigger organization. One of the reasons is because no dedicated cybersecurity resource, so they're not going to know what to do in that instance. And this also comes into, or this will follow on into the incident response plans, which we'll discuss later. But yeah, no cybersecurity resource. So what do they do? Who do they contact to try and remediate the issue that they have? For a bigger organization, they will have dedicated incident responders who will be able to respond. They'll be able to isolate networks, and they will be able to remediate. Smaller business, on the other hand, they will probably be asking their local IT. Probably the first port of call will be a local IT shop or a website. The NCSC probably here in the UK, and so that's the National Cybersecurity Centre, and try and get help that way. But once they're compromised, and usually it's through phishing and business email compromise, which is basically where um, again, the adversaries done their research and they're targeting specific people. They send a specifically crafted email with links in there that will probably entice them to click, which then again causes them to go to another website, and they've basically got their data. And for a smaller business without a cybersecurity resource, they may not even know that they've been compromised, and the end goal is probably um, for a smaller business. I think the end goal for the bad guys basically get money out of them, and and they probably are successful because they're not going to be able to, um, or they're going to struggle to manage to remediate the issue. And again, it's very, very costly to remediate, because if you're a small business and you've got maybe say 10, 20 computers, and you're operating on margins, how are you going to get the monetary, or you need to pay someone, probably your local IT shop again, to come and redo all this, or probably, sorry, I'm probably losing the point there, but it's basically to try and get the local IT shop to come and probably reformat all the machines, which is going to cost them time, money, and obviously they can't utilize the business. And again, this affects the reputation of that small business. If they're a supplier to some other organization, the other organization is probably going to go, we can't trust them with our data. Uh, they've been compromised, and now they can't process our orders, for example. So um, and yeah, basic protections are not enough. But again, for smaller organizations, it's very, very difficult to be as secure as possible. I mean, one of the I'm taking, not blaming Microsoft or anything, but taking a Microsoft tenant, setting up a new email address, which is Microsoft 365, even that out of the box is not fully secure. So if that is not secure from the first instance, and you have a local business that hasn't got a cybersecurity resource, you're not going to be able to achieve that cybersecurity posture that gives you enough security. Backups, and finally backups, and backups are important, very, very important, but again, the bad guys do tend to go for them, and the other issue with backups is, how do you know that your backup isn't compromised if the bad guy's been in your network for a long time? And if you restore from your backup after you've been attacked, how can you be sure that they're not going to get back in again if they've left backdoors? But backups are important, and always remember the rule for and make sure you have a backup offsite, and make sure it's
Three to
immutable
one
as well.
rule, basically.
3-2-1, 3-2-1
Yeah.
rule, indeed.
But we're talking Veeam, so we're talking 32110, obviously.
3-2-1-1-0. Yes, not just 3-2-1. We need to have
Yeah.
more than that. So anyway, that's where we are with that one. Again, more links, but obviously we won't go through with those. But as Lucas said, we will post those later on. Um, And then, yep, where to begin? So I guess this question here is if you're if you're starting on your cybersecurity journey, where do you begin? And I guess it's multifaceted. If you've been attacked, how do you begin as well? But I think in this instance, we're just basically talking about current journey. So it is a journey. It's not going to be something that's pretty straight. It's not something simple where you can just implement all the controls that you've got set security up to the max, because that's going to impact people and impact processes, and they'll just get annoyed and try and find a workaround to do their job. And it's more of a balancing act. But so where do we begin with this? So take an inventory of existing assets and services. So until you have a list or an inventory of what your current assets and services are, it, it you will have an idea of what your posture looks like, because once you have an idea of all your assets and all the services that you utilize, you can then determine criticality. How important are these assets and how important are these services? Is the an example could be like, is the local PC down near reception just displaying a presentation that important? No, it's not if it gets compromised. But if the finance director's PC is compromised, then that's a bigger problem. And again, this also comes into patching side of things as well. So um, if you know how important your assets are and how important your services are, you can then work on creating plans on how to better protect them. And just trying to think what we need to do. So once you have a plan of better protecting them, you can then determine criticality, yep, and also identify vulnerabilities within that within the organization, because now that you have an idea of what your assets are and what your services are, how vulnerable are they, and that can be done with so again, this will require tooling, but again, it doesn't have to be expensive. There are some open source alternatives, such as OpenVAS, which is an open source vulnerability scanner. Another one is Wazoo. And again, deploying those as even for an intermediate solution, it gives a good idea of what the network looks like, what the cybersecurity posture is, and it again helps determine how critical some of the assets are and what can be better done to protect them as well. And if you can protect those assets, and it just makes it easier if you're attacked, and it helps recover quickly as well. Because if you're patching vulnerabilities proactively, it gets harder and harder for someone trying to break in or even try and take over a workstation. Another good one is Splunk. They had to have a community edition that can be used, but is very, very limited. But a SIEM, so that's a security information and event management software, where basically it ingests logs and queries can be built to try and detect behavior that is not normal. So you can have a baseline of behavior, and then, so for example, the PC we talked about that was in the doing a present, just displaying presentations, it then tends to it's all of a sudden started probably downloading files and uploading data or something. Then having a SIEM can help detect that, because alerts can be created and then generated once the rules have been put in place, and then that way you can work towards establishing a baseline, and then if anything's not on that baseline, or it's become abnormal, it can be investigated and see what has gone wrong. And that is where you can help identify gaps and tooling. So if you're, I mean, these are open source alternatives, but as a good start, but they may not be enough, and you may look more towards spending a bit more money or utilizing other solutions to try and mitigate vulnerabilities and also try and improve your security posture. But that is a good starting point. But then after that, you can then do your controls, your like if your network's flat, you can try and segment it out, and obviously you need to try and stop what's the other one, lateral movement. So to stop people trying to get on a machine and then trying to then access someone else's machine and then access the network that way. But again, I mean, having a bit of monitoring is quite handy, and it will um, help identify any breaches or vulnerabilities. And vulnerability scanners are really good at that, and they will help mitigate tools. A good place to look as well is the CISS. That's the US cyber. Sorry, I've forgotten the name now. Cyber infrastructure agents. I can't remember. Sorry, it seemed to have lost. I can't remember the name, but it's the CISA in the USA, which is like the equivalent of the NCSC, which is a National Cybersecurity Center in the UK. And they publish their known exploits catalog pretty often, and they basically say what's being exploited by adversaries at the moment, and it's good to pay particular attention to those vulnerabilities because they are actively being used against organizations. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, I think that's what it stands for. I've just had a mind blank then, I've completely forgotten what they were called. So that's a good starting point. And then we go to takeover in small organizations. So coming back to the comment I made earlier about small organizations not having the resource and budget to be able to have I'd probably say a cybersecurity posture that helps them mitigate attacks, but also to try and be secure. They may not, I mean, like a local mom and pop shop, as they call it, they'll probably have a small business. They may lack there may be a lack of user training, so they'll just do what they've always done. They'll click on links. They will not be aware that there are threats out there that just by clicking a link can cause a takeover of a workstation. They get an email. So if you're working in the finance or accounts department, spear phishing, for example, where a link is directed to a particular person and they'll probably say something, and I've seen this as well, where they'll say, I've got my bank account has changed, or can you send the payment of this invoice to a different bank account? Here are the account details, and it happens. There have been there have been news or stories in the news of organizations losing quite a lot of money that way, where someone's actually sent a lot of money to a bank account, and they can't get that money back because once the bad guys receive that email, they've probably just withdrawn it and probably bought cryptocurrency. And how do you get that back? It's virtually impossible at that point. The other one, lack of user training. If the user is not aware of threats that are currently taking place, how do you protect against that? Because the threat evolves. I mean, back in the day, it used to be Microsoft ActiveX controls, but now that Microsoft, which is basically these object models that you could program in Visual Basic, but that's all gone. Well, it's probably still there, but it's not as high as what is going on now, which is you've got the clickjack vulnerabilities, and then you've got the uh, download of documents and then asking a user to take an action, which is basically do a copy and paste, which is the PowerShell asking a user to run a PowerShell script, which is which like they downloaded a Microsoft Word document I've seen, and then they ask the user to go and copy the PowerShell code and place it in the run box of the machine that they're working on, and that basically either installs a backdoor or installs an info stealer, and it just means that it's a way for someone to get in touch. And for a small business, if they haven't got a dedicated cybersecurity resource, how do they, if the email looks suspicious, who do they turn to, and how do they determine if that email is legitimate or not? Sorry. I seem to be losing my voice there. And then you have malicious actors purporting to be employees, and I have seen that as well, where someone is trying to be a user at an organization, and then they'll email their immediate line manager, or they will email, say, the finance director and say, I've got a new bank account, and I will need you to update those details. And with large organizations and also with disparate organizations where a lot of people are mobile, they never really meet face to face, and they may just go ahead and change the bank details, so the next pay packet goes into the malicious person's account. There have been instances where they'll say, and I have seen this as well, is they'll say, and this comes to the attackers learning about the organization. So they'll send in WhatsApp purporting to be the user's boss and saying, can you please WhatsApp me on this number? It's quite important. And when the user does that, they'll usually ask them to buy, what was it, gift cards, or to do a particular action, and then the user goes ahead and does it because they think it is their boss that is asking them to do it. So there's a variety of threats that targets the employee in the organization, but um, they if they don't get if the user, again, in a small organization, if they don't have the relevant training, it can be very, very difficult for them to spot, because they may not be aware of the malicious actor actively targeting them. So and I think I can go on to ransomware threats now. So ransomware threats, again, you don't, and again, this is more of a personal opinion, but I don't seem to hear that much of it anymore in the news. It seems to have dropped down the news a little bit, and it seems to be probably because of fatigue. I mean, how many times a day do you want to keep hearing about ransomware? It's always ransomware this, ransomware that, and I think it gets to a point where everyone starts ignoring it. And again, it's still present, and we have a link in here as well on it, how prevalent it is, and there are still it's still an ongoing problem. There are still victims out there, and a tactic now seems to be that the malicious actors will exfiltrate, because once they're on a network, they will exfiltrate the data and then ransomware the network, and then they will get back in touch with the victim and ask them to um, or ask them for monetary, some sort of monetary advance, because they want them to get paid for not releasing the data that they've exfiltrated. And it could be data that's personal data, people's, basically people's personal data. And in that instance, there's not much an organization can do. They can either they can either pay up, but which is always not a good thing, because it just forces the bad guys to keep doing what they're doing. And the um, other option is they just let they let the bad guys release the information and deal with it after that. But it seems to become more and more prevalent, and ransomware still is out there, and not doesn't seem to be changing. Yep, and there we go. There's the um, latest statistics, and this is 2025 as well. And as you can see, it's still an ongoing problem, and it's not fully gone away, and I don't think it'll go away at the moment either.
I think from the 18,981 victims, I think the popularity or the majority will be small business, small and smallest businesses, in my opinion.
Yes, there will be, because again, it's really it can be with AI as well now. It
Yeah.
can be relatively easy to try and entice users to do things that will cause compromises on their workstations. And I think, yeah, sorry, I've been droning on quite a bit now. So I think the only bit I was going to say as well, I mean, the changing nature of cybercrime as well is with it getting more and more difficult for them to go after the big organizations, they're now going for the edge network, which is basically their firewalls, and try and find vulnerabilities in those. But yep, it's an ongoing problem, and it'll probably no doubt be showing up in the news anyway as time goes on. But yeah, I'll hand over to Lucas now to
Yes,
uh,
thank you.
talk about passkeys and 2FA.
So 2FA passkeys, maybe just as a refresher, um, most applications, and I think most of us will log into web servers or Windows computers or any kind of system, mobile phones using passwords. So basically, you have like a 20-digit password that can be cracked within, don't know, 20 years, something like that. So there is a possibility that if somebody knows the password, which is basically digits, that this person is able to access a system, a web server, notebook, your mobile phone, whatsoever. So let's talk about passkeys. Passkeys, what is this? Basically, it's a combination. It's a digital key for authentication. So you don't need a password anymore. So it's usually a key pair, a public key and a private key, which is unique. So you have a passwordless authentication, and you can change the authentication in case of compromisation very easily. So it's the simplest and easiest way to move away from attack vectors. It's passkeys and it's two-factor or multi-factor authentication, because the attacker potentially don't usually gets the password and has access to the system. You have a second factor, which is personalization with your mobile phone, for example. You have Face ID, you have don't know Touch ID in case you have an older phone. So you need biometrical authentication to gain access to a resource, and that's basically a very huge security factor because that's not that easy to compromise. So moving away from passwords, moving to passkeys and to not only a single factor. Um, Passkeys and also the multi-factor authentication, if you use Microsoft Authenticator, any other tool, Google Authenticator, it's potentially easy to set up, and it also prevents the access for attackers also when the password has been compromised. So you need a strong password. I think everyone knows that, and that's obvious. But there is a backdoor that's for you to A, access the system, and B, to protect the system in case you don't have the password. So think about using multi-factor authentication. Just as a disclaimer, Microsoft with the Azure Active Directory, or the new name is Entra ID, has moved to force multi-factor authentication for the administrative accounts. And as far as I know, that has been really forced, which is a good thing, because even for glass break accounts, you have to think different, or think about different ways of securing the access. Especially when it comes to administrative rights, that's a very good thing in my opinion. So my opinion, or in our opinion, the future is passkeys. So passwordless authentications. Think the time will come when everybody will implement that and move to multi-factor authentication without passwords. Basically, a key pair can be encrypted and decrypted. So that's not 100% security, but you can significantly increase the security level by not only using passkeys, but to combine passkeys with second factor authentication. And as I said, there are ways to bypass this, but you have to think about risk analysis. So if you have, a unique key pair, which is your passkey with a high level of encryption, and you have a second factor on your private mobile phone, for example, on a personal mobile phone using biometrical authentication, I think the security level basically is very high. So some of the advantages of passkeys and that passwordless authentication would be cross-device compatibility. And you basically have a strong authentication if you compare this to passwords because of the security algorithms and the encryption algorithms you use. And you don't obviously, you don't need to remember passwords. So there's a high level of convenience, in my opinion. You don't have to type passwords, so a keylogger wouldn't be that effective. And you don't need to write down passwords. You don't have to work with tools to remember the passwords. You have to think about password solutions. If you have a key pass, a centralized key pass, or whatever tool you're using as a password safe, if somebody gains access to that password safe, this person might have access to all the data and all the passwords for all the systems, which should be a lot of systems because this is a centralized solution. So you have to think about securing those tools and those backdoors or those doors to authentication keys and passwords on a different level. So you should also think about securing those password tools with a second factor as well, with some kind of personal authentication method. That's it for the moment. So Dibs, I'm happy to hand over to you again.
Yep. Just going to mention with passkeys, one of the good things about it is without a password, if how does a bad guy log in? Because he hasn't got anything. He's probably got your username, but he hasn't got a password. So how is he going to log in without there's no way for him to log in because he doesn't have the passkey on your local phone to be able to approve the authentication. So they're a good thing, but they're not 100% foolproof. There is a Microsoft article on adversary in the middle attack, which they discuss how they or how a bad guy is able to get through that. But they're a really good solution to use. Anyway, so we'll I'll try and speed this one up. So change of attack vectors. So I mentioned earlier, it's basically as it's getting more and more difficult to for a bad guy to access an organization that's got a good cybersecurity posture, but now they are going for I mentioned previously suppliers. So the local supplier, I mean, whoever's supplying software, or these what you call it, binaries that are used within an organization, open source binaries. I think last year there was the issue where someone compromised or was going to compromise one of a open source package. And then that package, if it did get compromised, it would have affected quite a lot of organizations because they rely on that package to do certain functionality. So they're going after the binaries that organizations use, or they go after the suppliers that develop code. Info stealers is another one where now they are targeting the stealing of session cookies. So if you've got the session cookie, you don't really need to log in. You've already got the login details, and you basically got the same access as what the user had. And they're, they're, once they've got their cookie, they're basically accessing what they can. But there are, I mean, Google Chrome and I think Microsoft Edge as well are now implementing where they bind the cookie to the browser. So if the cookie leaves the browser, then that session cannot be stolen. But again, I think it's not proactive. It's more of a enterprise has to enable, an administrator has to enable that functionality. And then going on to incident response. So going back to the example from previously, where we have the public library and the financial organization, if the public, they're going to have completely different incident response plans. The financial organization is probably going to have a dedicated incident response team. So if there's been a compromise, they can utilize a playbook. And a playbook is basically a set of instructions or rules that basically say this is what needs to be followed to mitigate an attack, while the local library may not have something like that in place, and it may just be up to their local IT team to try and probably run a virus scan and try and get that machine back in order, while a financial organization may mandate that the machine needs to be removed from the network, completely re-imaged, which means basically completely reinstall the operating system and then put it back into production, or even possibly delete the hardware, or not delete the hardware, sorry, remove the hardware and um, start off from scratch from what they call a last known good configuration to ensure that they can say that they are fully secure. And again, there's a link to how to create a detailed response plan. But it is good to have a incident response plan. It just means that everyone knows um, what they are doing when an incident occurs, and it also means that there is a set of rules that everyone needs to follow in case of an incident. And it also stops confusion, and it also means that everyone is aware of their role and helps recover from the incident a lot quicker than if it was just like this machine's been infected. What do we do now? And then you have, for large organizations, they have to, depending on the incident, they have to report the incident either to the US Securities and Exchange Commission or to the Data Protection Authority if they've lost some data or they've deemed to be lost some data. So again, it depends. But an incident response guide, even a really basic one's a really good start to try and mitigate an incident. And I think I will leave it there for now. And I think we just come up to time. Yep.
That's it. So I think it's 7 p.m. No, it's 7:01. So I think it's 10 points, 100 points for the timing. Great job. And I'd like to go over to the Q&A session. So if anyone has questions, I have to switch back to the client. You should be able, hopefully, maybe Sophia can assist, to unmute yourself in case of questions. So just feel free to unmute. Or you can post it in the chat as well. As soon as I find the chat, there's some messages. You provide a link to that hardening demo. Of course I can. I reposted the presentation and the links in the community hub, but um, I will search for the link in a minute and just post it in the chat. No, Sophia did this already. Perfect. Thank you.
And I think Sal's put the link for the CISA cybersecurity advisories, which I mentioned earlier.
Yeah,
So it's definitely worth a look as well.
that is true. I think I will add the link to the summarizing post. That's a good call, and post it in the community hub forum. Are there any other questions? In case you have specific topics you'd like to discuss or you'd like to get more information on, I think it would be a good call to just let us know by private message, or I think you can reach out to us anytime you want. But basically, we'll announce the upcoming event, which we'll come to in a minute, with a forum post. So just feel free to post topics you'd like to discuss as a comment, and then we can bring them into the presentation. Also, if you know speakers or if you'd like to participate as a speaker to one of the events, because this is an event for the community. That's not our event, that's the event for the community, the first one. Since we are all over the world and more than 100 people, I think it's very ineffective to come together in a single place in person. So we'll have to stick with the virtual event for right now. But you know, this is a very open-minded community. So in case you'd like to be a speaker, have questions, just reach out and participate on that. That's not a problem.
Cool.
Tips,
Yeah.
anything you would like to add?
No, I was just going to say thank you for joining us on our first event, and we'd like some feedback as well. It'll be handy for us to take that feedback and see what else we can either improve, or if you've got any suggestions. And we're also going to try and aim to have a lot more of these events, because yeah, this is the first one. We've not done any before, and always happy to, as Lucas said, take any questions either via private message or post on the community hub, and just yeah, and any resources or anything that you might find useful, or if you'd like a particular topic for us to discuss, just let us know, and we're open to it. It's not a It's not a rigid. We don't have a rigid plan. We're happy to take feedback. So
Yeah, it's not static.
yeah, and yeah.
Perfect. So
Any more? Sorry, go on, Lucas.
no, it's just because we have a save the date. We're currently aiming for the 18th of June in 2025 for the second event. This is just a brainstorming idea, so in that might change a little bit. Let's see, but you can block your calendars for that date, and we try to collect topics and try to gain feedback from the recap post, which will go on shortly. I think Sophia will post the recording to YouTube, and as soon as I have a link, we will post the recap. So just feel free to put any comments you want. Save the date, June 18, 2025. And I think, as Michael said, some of you might be in San Diego. I will be in San Diego as well. I don't know about you, Dips. I think you won't make it this year, right?
No, I won't, unfortunately.
But that's I try to keep the cybersecurity space active in San Diego, so you can reach out to me anytime in person in case you attend the on as well. And I think any last words, Tips, because I think basically that's for now. Feel free to scan the QR code which leads to the cybersecurity space. So in case you don't have an account or you're not subscribed, just feel free to create one, subscribe, comment, participate the community. There's some basic rules I pin to the top, but basically it's a very open-minded community. You can ask and participate on everywhere you want. So just feel free.
Yep, absolutely. Lucas put it well. So I
Right. So
think I think that that pretty much concludes the first event. Yeah, and we like I said, any feedback would be helpful. And I guess one more chance for any questions, or I think, or is that pretty much it? I think.
next week or so. Perfect. Yeah, take your
Cool.
time. Maybe I've time to to put the post together during the 12-hour flight from Germany to Los Angeles. So perfect.